So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on this whole idea of the prosperity gospel and why people preach so harshly against it.
Hi, Pastor.
Yes.
I think at times those who are preaching the prosperity gospel is more amassing for themselves than for the congregation. Yes. And so I think from that single-mindedness, where it's all about giving to the church to amass wealth for the leaders, I think that's where I see a kind of a one-sidedness to it.
Yes.
And so it's not more so in saying, let us invest $1 million and help the single mothers, the widows, the widower, and all these. Even though they go abroad, yes, so they do charitable work in other countries, but in the immediate box of the church, you don't see that wealth is spread equally among the congregants. So I think from that perspective, I think it's kind of be lopsided or a single focus on the leader, the pastor of the church or the bishop of the church or whatever. Yeah.
I think for me, what I always think about was when it comes to the prosperity gospel, is the danger in when most of the time when you talk about prosperity, it's like it's an exchange thing with God.
Yeah,
we are doing things for God to give us things. The danger is that is if God doesn't give us what we want, what's next? Right? We're not doing things because of the love of God. We're doing things because of what we're getting from God, and that's a danger with the prosperity gospel always brought about sometimes.
Yes. And because the reason why I bring it up is all those things that you said, there's scripture in the Bible that talk about preachers that preach for filthy lucre. There's scriptures in the Bible about not taking care of the widows and the orphans. Like there are scriptures that outline bad leadership. Or there's scriptures that outline basically every concern that we have about the prosperity gospel. There are scriptures that basically deal with those issues. But what I found is that there are some preachers who don't preach about prosperity at all. Like they don't preach about anything about prosperity. They don't preach anything about transactional relationships or whatever. And I feel like I'm one of those preachers that don't preach that money is godliness, that money is the center of our life. Like I feel like I'm that kind of preacher. But I don't feel like coming on the screen and talking about specific ministers that I don't think are appropriate. Or I don't really feel like assuming that a minister is stealing money to make himself rich. Like I don't feel that need. I feel more that if I'm going to attack people's incorrect behavior, I need to have scriptures. And when I have the scriptures, I start to attack what a person is doing scripturally. But one of the issues that I realized that happened is that, like, for example, within certain communities that attack the prosperity gospel, those communities are attacking the things that you're saying, Sister Carlene, attacking the things that Percy's saying. But there's another community that if I was to teach the church that, you know what, God can bless you. God can bless you with a job. If you pray, God can help you to find a job. If you work really hard and you save your money and you invest your money in a wise way, you can become rich. Like, nothing I said there is evil, but there are a group of pastors that would say that I'm not a pastor for teaching people anything about finances. Because the prosperity gospel, any teaching on money, any teaching on the betterment of people as it relates to finances is evil. And they call this the prosperity gospel. So when one group says the prosperity gospel, they're talking about the misuse of stuff. And when another group is talking about prosperity gospel, they're talking about the misuse of stuff and also the upward mobility of the church. That a church should not be taught that financially they can grow. And for me, that's where sometimes we have to look at things closer. Because you and I could be saying the same thing, but we have a different heart about it. Because for me, like everything Sister Carlene says, those are concerns for me. And I've seen it. And I can't even lie and say I don't know ministries that do that stuff, where the pastor is driving this beautiful car and he's in the middle of the ghetto. Like, like I've seen it. But at the same time, not every teaching about financial empowerment in the church is about being a wolf and stealing money from people and misappropriating finances. Not every teaching on finances is wrong. But what I find is there are groups of people who don't even want you to teach about finances. And when those group of people don't even want you to teach about finances, the question is, okay, like, why is that? And I think sometimes because we have a clean heart, we listen to ministers and we think we're all saying the same thing, when in fact we're not all saying the same thing. And one of the dangers of false teaching is that false teaching, they secretly insert a philosophy that's meant to harm you. So for me as a pastor, I don't think the church has a responsibility, to be honest, I don't think the church has a responsibility to be putting out financial seminars and teaching you how to deal with money and so forth, because most people don't even want that. But I don't think it's wrong if a church does do it, because I think it helps people. If you know how to save money, if you know how to invest money in those things, I think those things are positive things. I would never say a minister is evil for doing that. But there are a group of people that have this concept that anything you teach about God blessing you is evil. I do some YouTube videos, and I don't even go into it because when I teach, I don't talk a lot about money. I probably should talk more about it than I do, but I don't talk a lot about money. I don't talk a lot about God's gonna bless you. I don't talk a lot of stuff like that. But I'll do a simple video on like wisdom around your money. That you shouldn't squander it on alcohol and addictions, and you shouldn't waste it. You should save something, just simple stuff like that. And people will come and attack me and say, you're preaching the prosperity gospel. You're preaching the prosperity gospel. And I see people do this to other ministers as well. And in fairness, the church is not always the best when it comes to money. Like people have made a lot of big mistakes. People have stolen money and done a lot of wrong things. So I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. But you cannot study the Bible, even as an individual. You cannot study the Bible if you're really studying it and not see that God has teachings on money and God has recommendations on money. And yet there are certain pastors that don't want you to teach about prosperity at all. Earlier, there's nothing wrong with a Christian being rich. So then, if a Christian is a pastor, so long as he doesn't get the money the wrong way or he doesn't steal the money or whatever, there's nothing wrong with a pastor being rich. But there are some people that have a problem with that say pastors should not be rich. That it's evil for a pastor to be rich. But if it's not evil for a member to be rich, so long as they don't steal the money, then it's not evil for a pastor to be rich, so long as they don't steal the money. A lot of preachers from all different walks of life are all preaching against something that they call the prosperity gospel. In fairness, the more I look into it, I haven't really heard any preacher from any denomination say that they preach the prosperity gospel. And the ones who have said it, they've said it more from a perspective of they've been accused of it so much that they just now grab it and use it as a nickname. But they never named themselves a prosperity gospel preacher. But there's this vehement attack, and they oftentimes link it to being a false prophet. But there's vehement attack against the prosperity gospel, and it's talked about over and over and over again. And I'm assuming that many people here have heard of it. Maybe you haven't heard of it, but I'm assuming most people have heard of it. And the thing all the preachers are saying is that it's wrong to be a prosperity gospel preacher. And then they have various different things, but if a person is teaching you to sin, then obviously it's wrong. So now if you take away all the teaching of teaching a person to sin, or manipulating a person for their money, or you take away all the different aspects of, like, teaching somebody that's something that's untrue or something that's a fable or whatever. Is it wrong for a preacher to preach to people that, you know what, if you apply yourself in the right way, if you pray, if you get your life in order, that you can be rich? And I guess a more direct way is the prosperity gospel something that's evil? Because all preachers are preaching about it being evil. And I haven't really heard any preacher really say, I am a prosperity gospel preacher, and I believe every Christian should be rich. I've never really heard anybody say that. Maybe they have, but I haven't heard it. But I've heard many preachers against it. Like, they spend a lot of energy fighting against this whole concept of prosperity gospel. I've heard many Christians angry and fighting against this whole idea of prosperity and preaching prosperity. But yeah, all of us have already said that we don't have a problem with anybody being rich so long as they use it the right way.